Good afternoon and welcome to Just Jocelyn. I'm so glad that you could join us today. I have a great guest. You know Alu, Elliot Axelman, and he is back with yet another book. We're going to show it off. Yes. It is The Pocket Guide to Killing Gun Control. Ooh, scary words. If you're scared, go eat your binky, go in the basement. We'll tell you when the show's over. If not, hang with us because this is going to be awesome. And what's really, really super, super cool, this is Alu's wife. This is his AR. This is his backyard. So there are no royalties and no copyrights. So talk about keep it in the family, keep it safe, know everything about it. I think this is brilliant. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me back.
I haven't talked to you for a while, and congratulations on your edition. We won't give too many details because, you know, not a thing that we do anymore in today's world, but congratulations.
Thank you.
Beautiful baby. So what made you, so is this your 10th or 11th book?
The ninth.
The ninth. I knew we were
working on the
somewhere.
10th, yeah.
Okay, working on the 10th. So ninth book, it's in a different style from your other ones because the other 8 books had thousands of words, as you were telling me earlier. This one has less wording and vocabulary. However, it's written in a style. What was the style?
I call it Ian Underwood style.
Ian Underwood
of his bare
style.
minimum books kind of series.
Yep. So when you read the pages, you're not overwhelmed and you can absorb the information, the facts a lot quicker. And I like that, especially since I read so much. I'm to the point where I look at a million words on there and I'm like, I'm going to have to read that page 3 times because I read so much that my brain just goes. So why did you write this book?
So I wrote an article on my site, libertyblock.com, probably 2-3 years ago now, about the title was something like 3 amazing reasons to oppose gun control or how to win the argument on gun control. There's a lot of material out there, and I hate reinventing the wheel, being redundant, but there are a few different approaches to arguing against the age-old debate of gun control. Now me, I'm a voluntarist. I don't believe there should be any gun laws, but there are a few different ways to argue it.
Okay.
Me, in my article I wrote years ago, which I've turned into a book because it had to be bigger and a lot more info I wanted, and I gave a speech at PorcFest that went very well. I recorded it. And then I decided to turn it into a book because it's long, and I like having a physical thing to give to someone, smack them in the face with it, metaphorically, of course, whenever they argue for gun control. But pretty much there are 3 basic large approaches that I think there are for arguing against any gun control. And each of the arguments essentially would help a person argue against all gun control.
Okay. Which is Second Amendment, inalienable rights, given to you by God, not the government. Just
exactly. So the first argument, which is my least favorite for a number of reasons, is the constitutional argument. It's a good reason, and again, if it were obeyed, then we would have no gun control at all. So I explained the Constitution. Most people know the Second Amendment, but I explain it. I have a lot of quotes and other text and correspondence from the authors of the Second Amendment, other founding fathers of the Bill of Rights and all that stuff. They all made it very clear. So
putting the constitutional argument completely in context.
Yeah, they all made it very clear that they wrote it so that every single weapon could be available to the people just like it is to the government. If the government can get it, you can get it. Yes, that means nukes. I also explain in the Second Amendment, the way it's written, it's very simple. It doesn't have any exceptions. It says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It doesn't say except for felons and minors and crazy people and those that are dangerous and those the government says shouldn't really have them, and except for guns and ammunition that the government deems to be dangerous. It doesn't say that.
No, it doesn't.
Now, do the founders ever do exceptions? No, they don't ever know how to put exceptions in amendments, do they? Well, the 4th Amendment says you can't search except probable cause. The 5th Amendment says due process, something, except something. So, a bunch of other amendments have exceptions. So there are a few. So they understood that. So they could have put it in the Second Amendment.
Your point being, they could have put exceptions in the Second Amendment. They chose not to. It also shows, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you think about that it wasn't the argument of, oh my God, it was decades ago. Everything they wrote stands today. So if they had exceptions to the 4th and 5th Amendment and they understood what they were, they could have, should have, might have, whatever they wanted, could have put it in the Second Amendment, but they chose not to, and it stands then it stands the same
Yeah,
today.
and I hear very often that in 1776, 1789, there were no machine guns. They had a one muzzle loader, fires one shot. It takes a century to reload the shot. Guess when the first machine gun, fully automatic, the first machine gun was patented?
I don't know.
1600 something. It's called the puckle gun. It was a machine gun. I think it worked like a Gatling gun, like as fast as you could turn
So they
the
might have,
knob.
it might have been manual, but it's
Yeah, but it was a
still
machine gun.
right?
Yeah, and it could fire, not quite as fast as an F-16, but it was fully automatic. Like they actually had it was patented in like 16 something. So by
do you hear
1700s they had
people?
that. Yeah.
1600s first.
Machine gun. Yeah, yeah. And that's patented, so there are documents all over that. So the founders knew about it. But again, it's not even about that. It was about the equality of if the government can have it, you can have it.
You can have it.
So
Okay.
we wrote an article on libertyblock.com. One of our co-hosts on our podcast and one of our journalists who was writing for us more back then, years ago, he's in Connecticut now, but he wrote, Michael Sinello, an article explaining that, yes, we can have nukes. And he explained, yes, we can. The Second Amendment says very clearly, if the government can have it, we can have it. But he explains, practically speaking, no one would be able to get their hands on a nuke because it's prohibitively expensive. It would cost you, billions or $1 trillion in research.
Correct.
When you don't have billions. No, people do, just governments. But also, just knowing how to handle it, the nuclear material without dying, you need like decades and you need multiple people with decades of experience in, being PhD scientists in knowing how to handle it without dying.
So just
realistically, no one would have nukes.
No, exactly.
But on principle, he says, and I agree with him in the article, he says, on principle, we can have it. But again, you're not going to be able to have it and bring it to your house unless you are so rich and so responsible that, you'll know how to keep it safe.
Correct.
It'll kill you. So yes, but what's interesting that I mentioned in the book that I haven't seen anyone else mention really is it says in the Second Amendment that minors and felons can have guns. And I want to debate the judges and the other federal judges, everyone, federal judges and others and constitutional experts who say the Second Amendment, they've said it as if it's canon. The Supreme Court says, DC versus Heller, you have a right to bear arms, but not felons and not minors and not crazy people. Where in the Second Amendment does it say that? And now it's constitutional law that a felon can't have a gun, but what should have higher precedence? The actual text of the Constitution, or what a few men in black robes who are lawyers and politicians in DC say?
That was not voted by 2/3 of the legislature and 2/3 of we the people.
Exactly.
Because both
Yep.
must. So just so you understand, and I do this all the time. I break in so people are like,
we can amend the Constitution. Amend it if you want to ban felons and minors from having guns. Because I agree.
amend the Constitution.
I agree. Murderers and 5-year-olds probably should not walk around with AR strapped 24/7. It's a decent idea. But we have to amend the Constitution.
And we do that by we the people.
2/3 of the House and Senate.
2/3 of the House
And then
and Senate.
3/4 of the state
and
legislatures.
Thank you. 3/4 of we the people in order to amend the Constitution. So just because the government neglects a sentence, leaves a word or two out, which they're very adept at in the state of New Hampshire, leaving phrases, words, sentences out as though we all voted it in, which we didn't. You go back to the archives and you find the actual text. That's in New Hampshire. So you want it, then amend it. But it hasn't been amended. So when someone says to you, you could do red flag laws, they're lying. It's not in the Constitution. Well, we passed a law. I'm sorry if it is repugnant and contrary to the Constitution. It ain't so.
And the point of the courts is to strike down laws, legislation, or regulations that violate the Constitution. So
Because they're supposed to opine,
Yeah.
not make law.
yeah, and they're supposed to be there to protect us from unconstitutional laws. So, for instance, again, if the Supreme Court in a different universe did what it should be doing,
Yep.
as soon as the first law was passed, which I think was the NFA by FDR in like 1930s,
That should have been.
it should have been the Supreme Court should have totally nullified the whole NFA, but they
Correct.
didn't. Again, so again,
There it
doesn't matter
started.
what judges say. It matters. The Constitution is very clear about that. But that's the I think least powerful of the three, probably. It's
Okay,
not
what's your
the best.
next?
The second argument I address is my favorite, and it's the one that I think is the best argument against all gun control. It's natural rights. Not everyone agrees, and that's fine. Here in New Hampshire, we try to live with like-minded people, but mostly people who support liberty and natural rights. All humans and all organisms, all animals, all plants even, all organisms have certain negative natural rights. A natural negative right is a right that, in order to be observed and not be violated, all it takes is inaction. And they're essentially infinite. But the big ones is self-ownership, property rights, the right to self-defense, the right to have property, the right to work, the right to talk, free speech. That's a negative right, because when I say obey, don't violate or obey or observe my free speech rights, let's say, you don't have to do anything. It takes inaction. What I'm asking for is inaction. Just don't.
So let's
Don't
give an
stop me
example.
from doing it.
So when you say, give me an example. of an inalienable of one of.
Free speech, property rights,
So I say,
self-defense rights.
but I get to tell you because I'm a yellow daisy.
Yep.
That is not necessary. That is should not. I should just ignore what you said and just be in my head. Well, I'm a yellow daisy. That's great.
Yeah.
That's your opinion.
Yeah,
and
anytime
this
you
is my
stop me
opinion.
from free speech,
so if I say that, I'm stopping you.
if I happen to say like I don't like the president, if you again, it's mostly the government. So if you pass a law saying Alu can't talk bad about the government, that would be violating my free speech because that's action. It's you sending men with guns, police to arrest me for speech, like they're doing in Canada and all over Europe, every other country. The United States is not quite that bad, although the First Amendment being violated. My next whole book is all about the First Amendment being violated.
I can't wait.
It's like if presumed guilty is Fourth and Fifth Amendment.
Yep.
The next book is going to be the First Amendment, and I'm working on it, but I'm going to need a lot of time, and it's going to be a massive book. So violating a natural right, again, a negative right. All I'm asking for is inaction. Just don't stop me. I have a right to talk, a right to own property. All I'm asking is ignore me, live and let live. A positive right, like Bernie Sanders says, we all deserve college and health care. It's a positive thing that he's saying, give to me. I'm saying I have a right to health care, and it sounds good on a bumper sticker, but a right to health care means that to give you that right, it's a positive
Somebody else
right.
has to
Someone
do an
has to,
action.
It requires action.
So you're taking money from someone else for you to have that positive action.
Yep. So
and positive, not in good.
Yeah, free healthcare would be, either the government stealing money from taxpayers, which they do, addressed in taxation stuff, the book, and they pay, government, they pay hospitals, doctors, or if not paying, then it would require the government to take a positive action by compelling doctors to serve me, and that's again involuntary servitude. It's slavery. So that's again violating natural rights. Anyway, the two negative natural rights I address are the right to self-defense. All humans, animals, and some plants have a right to self-defense, and the right to property. As you see, this lovely lady over here, Kate, she has an AR. It's mine, but she's using it here. Imagine it's for her AR. That's her property. All organisms, especially humans, and we recognize all humans who are competent and I think have some morality. We all recognize we have a right to property. Anyone can own any property they want. Again, you can't hurt someone. That's an action that violates someone, but you can own any property you want. She can own this shirt, she can own the jeans, she owns her hair tie, and she owns this tool that happens to be made of plastic and steel, and it can fire a projectile. It's a tool that can be dangerous, but so can all my tools, my saws, and everything else in my car. So it's
can a sharp
property.
pencil.
Yeah, exactly. It's property, and she has a natural negative right to own property. Again, it's a negative right, property ownership. She didn't say, if she would have said, Alu, I like your AR, I deserve one like it. The government has to provide me with an AR. I have a right to self-defense. I have a right to guns. The government has to provide me an entitlement to welfare. Then I would say you're asking for a positive right. But all she said was, I have an AR. My husband and I own it. All I'm asking is for you to leave me alone. I bought it. I bought it with my money. I bought this years ago. It's mine. Just buzz off, live and let live. Don't bother me and I won't bother you. So it's a negative right. So property rights and self-defense. Obviously, self-defense is self-explanatory. All organisms have a natural right to defend themselves.
Correct.
And again, it's a natural negative right. Self-defense means I'm only ever going to invoke it if I'm under physical attack, under danger. And observing it requires really no action, and violating it would be the action. So preventing me from defending myself, tying me up, or taking away my weapons to defend myself would be action, violating a negative natural right. So in the book, I explain in that second segment negative natural rights versus positive, and the two rights violated by all gun control is the right to property and the right to self-defense. And with red flag laws and some other stuff, there's First Amendment issues there too, and Fourth and Fifth Amendment issues of due process, free speech, and all that. But those are the two big rights.
Yeah. The red flag one scares me a lot. That one is just, well, but we won't go there. All right, what's your third argument?
So the third one, I say, for those who don't care about the Constitution and don't care about principles, maybe if you're debating someone who doesn't care about those things, maybe they care about the actual practical argument of gun control doesn't work. So in practice, again, I don't love the argument because then they'll say, well, if gun control did work, then would you support it? No, because I have principles. I like the natural rights argument. But anyway, for those who don't care about rights, those without strict principles, practically it doesn't work. So if you look at New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, and Wyoming, they all have traditionally had zero gun laws. Vermont now has a tiny bit of restrictions on magazines, and New Hampshire has gotten better. Now they have no permit required for any carrying. But those four states have had, for a while, pretty much no gun laws. Carry, no permits, whatever you want. And they consistently are the four safest states. Every year, it's those four. They switch around number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Of safest states, if you look at, I believe, gun crime, overall homicide, and overall violent crime. So in all those categories, I believe those four are the safest states. New Hampshire is number 1 or 2, I think, every year. Look at the most dangerous states, and especially cities, where the crime is, dense.
in California, New
Yeah.
York,
Well, number one,
Chicago.
Baltimore is always the highest
Baltimore.
murder per capita by far.
Okay.
It's been, I think they have pretty strict gun control. Maryland has very bad gun control. Democrat run for a while, and a rhino now, I believe. But Baltimore has been run by exclusively Democrats for over 100 years, I believe. All Democrats, 100%, I believe, the mayor, the council, everything. And they probably have additional gun control in addition to Maryland's very bad laws. Baltimore is number one in per capita murder every year by far. Some people think Chicago is number one, and I thought so too, but the stats actually show Baltimore is way and above the rest. So Chicago, New York City's bad. LA,
Yep.
a lot of New Orleans and
What
East
about
St. Louis.
Seattle? Seattle up in there?
I'm not sure. It might be close to the top.
yeah.
But like all those cities that have been run by only Democrats for decades, for a century.
But
they
more
are the most
importantly, that they
dangerous.
have different forms of gun
Yep.
control. But gun control never stops a criminal. Gun control never stops anyone, an illegal or illegal, that want one and they go get one.
That's what I mentioned in the book. Laws, by definition, only apply to those who will observe the laws, and those who don't obey the laws. For instance, criminals, who the crime is the root of the word criminal. It's very simple stuff. And law-abiding means you obey the law. Very, very simple. Even I think some progressives can understand that. And also the government, it doesn't apply to them. So the same people, and I explain the hypocrisy in the book. The same people who say the government, the police, the Trump, everyone, they're all fascists. They're hunting black men. They're all racists. At the same time, they say only they should have guns.
So
Civilians
that's totally
shouldn't have guns.
discriminatory, totally I in a republic, but yet, oh no, they keep shoving that, we're a democracy. No,
Yep.
we're not, because that means 51% can decide for the 49, and we're not. We're a republic.
Well, it shouldn't be, but effectively we function
Correct.
as a democracy. But yeah, I think the big point, if you believe that the government is Nazis, which the left has been saying for a while, they're fascists, the police are hunting black men, why do you want them to have guns and why do you want to disarm yourself? It doesn't make sense. If you really believed
Right.
you were living in a Nazi kind of fascist regime,
Why would
wouldn't be
you go
disarming
along
yourself.
with that?
Yeah. So again, there's a lot of hypocrisy there. And then like part 3A in the book is the emotional argument. So for a lot of people, the emotional argument will carry the most weight.
I don't. Let me do the best one that
Yeah.
I hear all the time. I don't like guns. I'm afraid of them. Don't touch one.
Yeah.
then.
Well, I mean, using the emotional argument to argue for gun rights and talk about the true stories, or make up a hypothetical. But there are plenty of true stories of people who, weak, old, sick old lady who's tiny, who can't defend herself but for using a firearm, and a bunch of guys attack her and try to kill her and rob her, and she defends herself with a firearm. Pulls it out and they run away or shoots one of them or whatever. So there are tons of stories. Let's look up defensive gun use, and there are countless stories. You'll never even
Yep.
find them all. There are too many.
I've seen quite a few of teens that were home alone and had been taught how to use a firearm properly, knew how it was stored. Parents had taught them correctly when to use it and when not, and protected themselves from being murdered, killed, or kidnapped.
Yep.
Well, that murdered and killed is
Yeah, in the
same
book I have
thing.
a few of those examples, and again, like even thinking of my mother, she's like 66, 67, she's like under 5 foot now, shrinking, arthritis. She's not in the shape to, fight off multiple men who attack her, obviously. She can't run fast enough to run away from any man at this point. Her only prayer if she's attacked, either die, her only fighting chance is with a gun.
Correct.
It's just that simple. So use the emotional argument when you're debating if you want, and say, do you want my mother to die? Because right now she lives in Jersey where there's gun control, so she cannot have a gun. Absolutely
Wow.
not. New Jersey's the worst in some ways. It's one of the worst, and in some ways it's the worst state for gun control. You can't even think about having a firearm. Getting a permit is next to impossible anyway. And without a permit, if you have a gun, you go to prison forever. So she can't have a firearm. So if someone breaks into her house, or if she's walking alone at night, which she does have to work sometimes, walk into her car, and she's attacked, she will die. Or the person will have whatever way they want, if they want to steal from her, whatever. They could take her car, So if she has a firearm, she's got a prayer at least. I'm not saying it's the panacea, it'll stop everything bad in the world, but there was a big
But
study
it's
done.
a tool.
Yeah, there was a big
It's one
study
tool for her.
on people. I think it was like attempted rape or something, or attempted attacks, and it showed that people who fight back, they deter like 50%, because if you fight back a bit, sometimes they run away.
Yep.
Those who used any weapon, gun was the best, but any weapon was actually like 80 or 90% effective, and a gun was like
Wow.
90, 99%. But using any weapon at all to fight back was like almost totally effective. Fighting back with just your bare hands was like, I think 50%,
Okay.
and without fighting back, pretty much none. But it's very interesting that if you fight back, especially with a weapon, especially with a firearm, people have very high chances. I'm not saying my mom has to become Jackie Chan and beat up every attacker in a circle fight with 15 people, but
Right.
if you pull out a firearm, most criminals will not
Think
want to
twice.
soft target. Yeah. So some are psychotic and they won't understand. They might get shot. They don't understand danger, but a lot of them will take an easier target. Even some psychotic people can understand. There are softer targets, and don't mess with someone with a gun. So I think carrying. I tell everyone to carry. I tell my wife, and she does carry now. I tell women, everyone, especially women, especially elderly, especially those who are sick or injured or disabled, everyone should carry. I always do, and sometimes I feel a lot more comfortable, and sometimes I would, not be comfortable if I weren't carrying, because I'm in a situation that's just not feeling great. Like even in downtown Manchester, sometimes in certain areas, certain late at night. So that's the other argument, the emotional argument. So you can get emotional, and I can talk, and I have a few stories in the book, but there are tons of other people who have been threatened. My brother was dating a woman who was a nurse, a single mother. She had 2 teen kids, and they were all threatened by her crazy psychotic neighbor. She couldn't have a firearm. If her neighbor would have hurt one of them, there's nothing she could have done.
Wow.
So her and her teenage daughter couldn't have fight back against her man neighbor who threatened them, who was crazy. If she had a firearm, she at least would have a chance.
Right.
So that's the emotional argument. So those are kind of the 3 or 4 different ways, depending how you look at it, to argue against gun control. And then the last part of the book, it's like the last third, it's all like 25 appendices for people who are new or somewhat new to firearms and ammunition, explaining the basics of how to buy a gun, the best places online or a store, the basic laws, the basic procedures, basics
how
of
does ammunition work?
Yep.
What does it look like? And let me say to you ladies, do not let your husband, your boyfriend, or your fiance buy you your first weapon. Go to the store, try them out for yourselves. Size matters, weight matters, the grip matters, the weight in your hand. Do not let anybody else choose for you. It's very personal.
Yeah, it's pretty personal, kind of like clothes or a car. So I agree. In general, I would say get a firearm, you buy it yourself. You'd rather not buy it online. You want to
take someone that knows what they're talking about, but don't let them decide for you. Come home and go, here, I got you a 380.
Yeah, you want to feel it and make sure that it does feel decent and fits your hand and stuff. They all are meant to be pretty universal, the grips. Some grips are more aggressive, some are more smooth, and you might like one or the other. I love aggressive, the most aggressive stuff. I want sandpaper. I just like it. It feels good, and I know it won't slip even when you're sweaty or wet. So I like that. Some people might like less aggressive. The other things is size. A lot of people think, oh, you're a cute petite woman, you want to get you a small gun.
I started with a 22. It lasted 4 weeks.
Yeah, so 22 has a 22 caliber has issues of it's very, very small round, not quite as reliable, and really so small and so not powerful.
Correct.
It's
but that's an example of, here you go, honey, it's okay.
Yeah.
Quickly moved up. I went to a 38 special.
A revolver.
A revolver.
Okay.
I went to a revolver because in my head, I needed to understand in the mechanics, and it goes in there, and this is how many are there.
Super
and you
simple.
Close it, and click, click, shoot, shoot.
Yeah.
I needed to totally understand.
But how was the kick on that?
The mechanics, pretty intense.
Yeah, because it was a small revolver.
Correct.
Exactly. So the other thing, people think, small petite woman, a small gun is great. It's not. It's counterintuitive, but similar to like a vehicle or something. If you're in a car accident, you'd want to be in a fire truck as opposed to a tiny Ford Escape, because the larger, heavier thing absorbs
Takes
the energy.
the impact.
Yeah. So with firearms, it's exactly like that. A small light revolver, 38 specials, a decently powerful round. Compared to someone who's never shot. And the kick, the gun weighs so little, like under a pound maybe, or under a few pounds, it won't absorb a lot of energy. It's going to go to you, and you're going to feel it in your hand, and it's going to be very uncomfortable, and it's going to hurt your hand. It's going to be hitting your hand hard at the handle. So the bigger the firearm and the heavier the firearm, like they used to be steel, now they're mostly polymer.
Right.
But the heavier, like a 1911, is a lot better. It absorbs a lot more recoil. Now, if you're carrying an 8-pound gun on your hip all day, you may not love that, but the bigger and the heavier, it's going to be way easier to shoot, more fun to shoot, meaning you're going to train more and you're more likely to carry it.
Yep.
That being said, if you do want to concealed carry, I open, but I used to conceal carry. If you want to conceal, you do need something that's smaller. So there's a balance of smaller is easier to conceal, but also a lot harder to shoot.
Correct.
And the shooting is not the biggest issue. It's that training. You'd like to train with your gun a lot.
And everything
if
along with
it's not comfortable to shoot, you won't train a lot. I had one of my first guns, my second gun was an LCP 380. It's 380, a bit smaller caliber than 9mm, but still powerful. And the tiny gun, it was like the lightest, thinnest, lightest gun. And it absorbed no recoil. And it would hurt so badly, I would never go to the range and shoot more than 1 or 2 magazines of it. So I never trained a lot. So I carried it. If I had to use it in an emergency, I'm sure I'd be okay with adrenaline. But
not
if you
as a
can't train
training.
a lot, that's the issue. So
that's where I changed in the training, and I went to full-size 9mm.
Good. Yeah, that's what I would say.
And you know
full
what?
Size.
It's awesome. Now I cringe with the other ones, but I train with the 9mm, and I love the the 9mm.
Yeah.
Love it.
9mm throughout the book is pretty much what I recommend. It's so universal. It performs ballistically as well as pretty much any round, even bigger ones. But it's great because it's smaller than the bigger ones like 45 ACP, 40, and 10mm and all that. It's smaller, so you can hold a lot more in the same size package. So I can hold like 10 plus 1 in a pretty small package. And it has good ballistics. And 9mm is the most common and most abundant, meaning cheapest and most available. So a few years ago during this pandemic, when it was hard to find any ammo, 9mm could be found and for the best price. Whereas if you shot a less common round, you were paying $1 a round or you couldn't find it.
Correct.
Mostly couldn't find it.
Correct.
So that's another thing to think about of ammunition is something that you do need to keep buying because it'll go bad, you use it and all that stuff, and you want to have a lot of it. And 9mm always is going to be the easiest to find in the universe, besides maybe 22, which again, I wouldn't recommend for self-defense because of reliability and the really small amount of power. But I go through a lot of other ballistics and basics of how guns work, how ballistics works, how to buy a firearm, basics of holsters and what holsters should entail if you're going to buy one, and just tons more info about the ATF and how the laws work.
I love it. So people can get this on Amazon?
Yes, ma'am.
So again, The Pocket Guide to Killing Gun Control by Alu Axelman, available to you at Amazon. Pick it up. He's got 8 other books that you can take a look at. They're absolutely excellent. They teach you so much. They're well written, easy to understand. I have them all. Now I have this one. So I am up to date. So now it's your turn. I want to thank you so much for coming in. And for the next book, I need you back. We need to talk about it and maybe start all over with some of the other books as well.
Yeah, I will come back anytime. I love it. It's like my favorite show.
Thank you.
And 3 of the books are on Audible now. A lot of people, one of the biggest complaints is people would rather listen.
Yep.
And me too, I prefer audiobooks. So 3 of them are on Audible.
Especially when you're driving, yeah.
Yeah, Presumed Guilty, the Corona Fascism book, and the Blueprint for Liberty as well, I believe. No, Presumed Guilty is in process. Articles of Secession is on Audible. So they can find that as well. All on Amazon, aluaxelman.com and libertyblock.com have the info as well.
Excellent. Thank you, my friend. It's so glad to see you.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next week.